Hello and welcome to Experts Corner. This is Mansoor Jafar. Tonight we are going to be exploring the latest developments and what's happening in Middle East, especially the Gaza Strip. We are talking about the International Court of Justice that has really reiterated Israel's role under international obligation and international law, especially Geneva Convention, that it has to let the aid enter into the Gaza Strip. Firstly that, and secondly a very important development that has taken place is that the Israeli parliament has passed an annexation bill for the occupied West territory, and that's really troublesome. There's a lot of questions relating to it. For example, how would it contradict the international law, firstly, and secondly, what it would really mean for the Palestinians who are living there, who already are deprived of their rights? What does it mean? Secondly, we'd be taking a look tonight on the trade war between US and Canada. They have been doing it since February. They have been imposing tariffs on each other's good worth billions of dollars rather. But we also see that the industries are being suffering, the workers, the businesses on both sides are being suffering. But latest the news is that there is now a complete halt in any kind of trade negotiations by the US on the basis of a political ad that was being played by Canada. Now we need to know what is the kind of future between both these countries when it comes to trade. How is it going to impact the workers, the businesses, the industries and consumers on both ends? Now, for further analysis, we have Mahnoor Qureshi with us. Also, we are joined by Barrister Fatma Shaheen online. We have Mansoor Jafar as well, Middle East Affairs expert online with us. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining in. So, we'd like to start with Mansoor Jafar. Mr. Jafar, first of all, how do you see now the annexation bill being passed in the Israeli parliament, another red line crossed? How do you see this move? First of all, your comment on that.
Well, I consider this is yet another transgression of the international law and the trust which the American administration reposed in the so-called abilities of the Netanyahu Israeli Prime Minister. Because if you look at the recent speech which he delivered at the Knesset, in which he went beyond the call of duty in order to favor him, in order to seek exoneration for him from Israeli Supreme Court on the charges in which he is implicated, and he is likely to be disqualified. But even now, even Netanyahu and his government did not pay attention to all of the American favors which have been receiving over the period of time, especially during the last 2 years of the Gaza war, in which American administration, especially, they came under severe attack, severe backlash of the international community regarding their support, regarding their unconditional support to the state of Israel, which resulted in the killing of more than 70,000 and lot many injured, and entire catastrophic situation is prevalent in the Gaza just due to the policy pursued by the Israeli government at this day. Actually, this move of the annexing the West Bank on the part of the Israel is not new, because they have been claiming that in the light of their so-called Greater Middle East Plan or Greater Israel Plan, that the entire land, starting from the Palestine to Jordan to Iraq, all this belongs to their so-called biblical state of Israel, which they claim that it was there before 3,000 years ago. So this is their what we call a claim that has got so-called foundation in their own religion, and this has been distorted. This religion has been distorted. The Judaism has been distorted by the present regime, because they are following the dictations which have been given to them, or the policy given to them by the Zionist regime, or by the Zionists who basically are pursuing this agenda. And that is why they are not taking into account any international law, either starting from
Mr. Mansoor,
their attack on the
absolutely, this is the case. They're not taking into account anything that they're doing. They're crossing all the red lines. But Mr. Mansoor, since we know that they had the umbrella, they still have the umbrella of the US protection around them. They are still there. There has been a peace deal negotiated. But what if we come to this tilt now that we are seeing from the US side, as it is a matter of credibility of President Donald Trump, when he said that Israel might lose US's support, crucial support, if such a move is done?
Certainly, this is a severe backlash and a severe reprimand on the part of Donald Trump because previously he have been serving him various displays on various occasions, especially when he held a meeting with him in New York, in which he expressed his severe displeasure on the Israeli attack on Qatar, which basically landed the American administration in a very perplexed situation because being the very important ally of the American government in the Middle East and hosting the largest CENTCOM base over there. So it was a very, what we call, embarrassing situation for the American administration as well. And this situation of annexing the Israel with the West Bank area, yet another what we call the problem for him, and that is why the situation over there is deteriorating day by day, and the trade and the trust deficit between the American administration and the Israeli government is getting wider day by day, and this is that is why. In order to keep to rein the what we call the so-called policies of the Netanyahu administration, American administration, especially Donald Trump, sent his very high officials, including his son-in-law and Steve Witkoff and the Vice President of America, to the state of Israel just to keep an eye on the development which are taking place under the under the Netanyahu administration over there, because this shows the lack of trust which American has got in the present regime, especially in Israel, because Netanyahu is not looking beyond his nose, his political career, and he is just bullying each and every norms of the modern day international polity, and especially creating trouble for his allies as well, because entire Europe is against his policy, entire Muslim world is against his policies. So, and at the same time, they are looking for entering into the Abraham Accord with those states and killing their brethren on the other hand. So, this dichotomy
Absolutely,
has
Mr. Mansoor.
created
Since
a
you talked about the Abraham Accords, I would like to continue, build up on that question. How would you see that? Number one, if this move happens in any way or form, Israel doesn't stop. We all know that it doesn't respect the ICJ. It might not respect. We all know that. But if this move happens, then how do you see the peace process going on? How would you see that? Number one, and since you talked about the Abraham Accord, how do you see its relations with other countries as well?
certainly if the Israeli government continue to pursue the policy of annexing the the West Bank area. So, because if you know, when the Abraham Accord was signed 4 years ago in the first term of Donald Trump, so the UAE was persuaded because at that time the same kind of propaganda and the same kind of hue and cry was there in the corridors of Israeli powers, because they were planning at that time also to annex the West Bank area. And the United States of Emirates were taken into confidence at that time by the American government that we are not going to allow the Israel to annex the West Bank area. And they considered this thing as a very big achievement on their part. And this made them to think of entering into the Abraham Accord. So recently, the UAE government has even served a very severe reprimand to the Israelis and termed it as a crossing another red line. And this thing, I guess, will make the signing of the other Abraham Accord with other Muslim countries, Arab countries, a very
Absolutely
bleak
impossible.
opportunity.
Yeah. Also, Mr. Mansoor, there's another question that I wanted to ask. What key politicians are interested in doing that? Of course, the far-right coalition members are pressing. What might be the motivation now? Because he's in trouble. Seems like he's in trouble at home. There's a lot of push coming from his coalition members. And then he might have this delusion now that US is still standing with that. And also, there's another question. The West Bank is already full of Israeli settlers. So it's more like a symbolic gesture. It's just a bill, but why does it matter now?
Because they want to send a very strong and clear message to the world that this area belongs to them and there is no place for the Palestinian in this area. And they want to replicate the same model in the West, in the Gaza Strip also, because that is why they have been planning and pushing the Palestinian living over there under the pretext of killing the terrorists over there, the fighters over there. And their plan is just to annex, to control entire area and then move forward towards the other Arab countries, which they declared that they also form the part of their so-called Greater Israel. And this is the basically agenda which is basically now triggered or moved by the ultra right allies in the Israeli parliament. But I guess Netanyahu should be wise enough. He will have to choose between their local allies, the the Samotrach or the Itamar bin Gavir kind of people, or the American government, which has been assisting them, helping them, nourishing them over the period of time since when they have captured this area, since when they have usurped this land of Palestine. So he has to decide, and this is, I guess, a decisive moment for the American administration as well, that for how long they can continue to support the genocide being committed by the Israel in the Gaza Strip, and for how long they will have to support the Israel who is committing daily violation of the international law, international
Which is,
norms,
yeah.
and violating all the diplomacy which is respected by the community of the world. But Netanyahu is just heading towards his own agenda without considering, I guess, the repercussion of his policy which he is pursuing at this moment.
Whatever is happening, right? We're turning over now to Barrister Fatma Shaheen. Since we're talking about the international law, how do you think this move of annexing occupied West Bank contradicts with the international law? What does international law says about that?
Thank you, Maheen. I'm very glad that you put that question because, we can't, of course, ignore that perspective to start off with. When we talk about international law, what is very important to note here that there are very strong judicial precedents, that too by the UN's top court, that is the ICJ in this regard, which very clearly state that, actually building this wall in itself would be a very flagrant violation of international law. And if I may quote part of the judgment, it says that Israel's policies and practices, including particularly settlement construction and the separation wall,
Right,
amount to
if you can hold the
annexation of large
conversation.
parts. Yeah. Can you hear me
Yeah, if
there?
you can hold the conversation. I just wanted to say thanks to
Sure.
Mr. Mansoor Jafar, who was with
Sure.
us, Middle East expert. Yes, please, now you can continue.
Right. So the thing is, the court in this very categoric judgment, it ordered Israel to let go of its settlement activities and to evacuate all settlers because this clearly amounted to violating the Palestinians' right to self-determination. So you see, this is that one issue which just doesn't involve all the atrocities that Israel is committing, that too completely ignoring the international law, but it also, on the contrary, gives us that insight the way the Palestinians are also equally impacted by it. Now, when we do talk about that, other than this, already very strong judicial precedent that we do have in the form of ICJ's advisory opinion, we also have statutes, UN Charter, Article 2.4, which very clearly states that, again, Israel under international law cannot by force acquire any such territory. Then, when we talk about the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2334, particularly, that in itself also reaffirms the territorial acquisition, whether it is by threat, whether it is by force, something which, of course, Israel is doing, is clearly inadmissible.
Barrister
So,
Fatma,
if
also
we sure,
let us know about the rights of the Palestinians, those who are living in the
sure.
West Bank already with lots of Israeli settlers. What do you think? What is the human right? What does the international law says about the human rights of the people? Are they going to be displaced? What would happen to them?
Right. So you see, like I earlier said, this is an argument which should be seen in two ways. When we talk about the right of the Palestinians, Maheen, the most important thing that I would be then concerned about would be that they would completely lose, political agency. They would completely lose, their land, their resources. They would lose their right to be, even a movement to start off with, the
I
way they
think they
would want to
still have
live their
lost it
lives.
all. Hmm.
Of course, but that would be kind of reiterating the same thing again. And then when we talk about this from the legal perspective. You see, they would then be in effectively a two-tier legal system in place. We would see Israelis having their own civil laws in place, whereas the Palestinians still being under the military rule. And as a human rights activist, I would be most concerned about the fact that, the institutions there in place, the international treaties which actually protect them, whether it is the ICSR or whether it is the ICCPR, they would, they would lose all effect to start off with. There would be no institutions in place so as to safeguard their rights to start off with. Not
Vice
that, the
versa, I think there
situation was
still
any
are
different.
no
Of course,
institutions like
but
that.
it
I
would
think they're
worsen the
crossing all the
situation.
red lines. And now we'd go over to Mahnoor. Mahnoor, what is your comment on the entire situation, especially the annexation of the West Bank coming from the Israeli parliament?
So Mahin, before commenting on that, I would like to comment on what Mansoor has said, that they are supporting each other, or we have seen that the Marco Rubio, Jerry Vance were in Israel, still they passed the bill. That shows that they are supporting each other under the table. There is no rift. We cannot deny the importance, and we cannot deny how much Israeli lobby is, strong in US, how much they are taking benefit of it, and how much they are having stronger relations when it comes to economic relation, when it comes to defense relations with US. So we have seen that they are still violating. There are all kind of humanitarian crises there. Today we have seen that Norwegian relief organization with International Committee of Red Cross, along with the other 40 humanitarian organization, issued a letter in which they have mentioned that they requested Israel to enter there for humanitarian aid, and then they categorically rejected that idea. So that shows that we have seen every kind of humanitarian crisis there, but the world is still quiet. But one ray of hope we have seen there is Muslim world is on one page when it comes to Palestinian people crisis, and we have seen that Saudi Arabia has categorically said that they will not strike any deal with Israel till the formation of Palestinian state. So that shows that we have
we have to be very cautiously optimistic, Manur, because there are so many aspects we're still waiting for what's going to happen, because it's about the credibility as well. Since we talked in detail about the Gaza situation regarding the move, the Israeli parliament has passed a bill to annex the occupied West Bank. I think just not the entire world, US and Pakistan along with 14 countries have really issued a statement saying that it is not going to happen. They have really condemned it, saying that it is the breach of international law, and Israel is really crossing all the limits. And I think only US and President Donald Trump can really put a stop to it. We'll be continuing with our discussions after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now we'll be taking a look at the US and Canada trade war that has been happening a lot from February, but now the latest is that there has been a sudden halt in any kind of trade negotiations from President Donald Trump, especially after a controversial ad from Canada. Now we have been joined by Shikoh Atif online. He's a global financial expert, senior economist from Canada. Thank you so much for joining in.
Thanks for having me.
Now, if you could elaborate a bit for our viewers, what does this halt in the trade negotiations from the US has immediate impact? How does it immediately impact the industries, the workers, the consumers at both ends?
Yes, ma'am. So 75% of Canada's exports go to the US. And Canada, in turn, is the largest purchaser of US manufacturing. So, and both of these countries, they produce a lot of technology jointly. So, for example, parts of an automobile might be produced in Canada and then it's finished in the US and vice versa. So, and the people are really impacted direly because of this, especially in Canada, because 75% of its market is the United States. And in Canada, the government and have been lax in developing alternative sources of a marketplace. So the impact is dire, and the relationship has been exemplary up until the present uh, um, Trump regime. Uh,
Yeah.
The impact
I've
in
also heard
Canada
that
is,
yeah, I've
yes,
also
ma'am.
heard that it's now entering, it's now extending in the energy sector as well. And just now you mentioned that there are joint ventures of technological exports and industries. Please elaborate more for us. How could this be a long-term damage or hurt when it comes to both these countries economically?
For sure, ma'am. For Canada, it's devastating now, but it is going to be terrible in a few months, and I'll elaborate, because right now what they were deliberating over was only 26% of the global marketplace. In Trump's first regime a few years ago, they had signed a treaty which excluded 74% of goods that Canada exports. And that was under the US, Mexico, and Canada treaty, which is going to come up in a few months for renegotiation. And for now, in the present negotiations, that part was excluded. But in a few months, when even that comes back on discussion, then the whole of Canadian economy is going to be under a spotlight. And you very aptly put a spotlight on energy. Now, Canada is one of the largest exporters of oil in the whole world. But again, the market has been United States. More recently, the US has sort of started digging up its own reserves and has actually become one of the largest producers of oil. So they don't have that much dependence on the Canadian oil anymore. And Canada is really struggling to develop alternative markets even for its energy needs. As Canada being also the largest purchaser of the American production, yes, the American worker is also struggling. For example, an automobile that was being purchased by an American in America for, say, $50,000 suddenly has started costing them, the American consumer, 70 to $80,000. But Trump is still has enough electoral support to push these reforms through and make his own people suffer as they walk away from cheaper resources from Canada, may they be from China, but he still has enough of a communication with his own people to sell it and to make them go through this pain process. Because what he's telling them is, go through this pain and we will start our own manufacturing, we will start our own production. What that will do is give our own people as an Americans jobs, and they will have greater purchasing power. And it all comes down to purchasing power all across the globe. The only country which really has a lot of the middle class of the country has a lot of purchasing power is the American consumer. And that American consumer is what is keeping the whole global economy afloat. And that's what sort of America is threatening to take away from Canada and from other parts of the world. Fortunately, fortunately for me as a Pakistani, not so much from Pakistan, but from Canada, where I am presently, ma'am.
Now, Mr. Atif, also tell us a bit about the Canada's option. What are the options that right now Canada have? Like you mentioned, that it's devastating for Canada and the economy would be in spotlight soon. Is it going to find other markets? And if that is the case, would it be able to replace the US market?
Ma'am, this issue has actually just come up by the Canadian politicians, because everyone applauds whenever they say, Trump is bad, US is bad, we can survive. And this was the you mentioned the ad. That's what the ad said. In the middle of the negotiations, it painted Trump and all of this negotiation in a very dark light, and they said we are self-sufficient. But as an economist, I can tell you we are not self-sufficient. We
Mr.
need,
Atif, doesn't it kind of,
especially,
since we are talking about the controversial ad, doesn't it kind of blurs the line when we talk about the, public communication or maybe giving out a message in the form of a campaign, other than the very important negotiations that were taking place? How does it blur the line?
Very good point, ma'am. So it's actually way below an American leader to go in and watch an ad and bring that to trade negotiations and say that was bad, because politicians generally understand that there is messaging that is for public consumption, and then there is messaging for between two statesmen. But Trump has actually picked out a small advertisement had made and has made that the reason for uh, uh, walking away from the trade talks.
Right, Mr. Atif, a very quick question. That means it shouldn't even have happened at the first place from the Canadian side. Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. It shouldn't
Thank you
have.
so much, Mr.
But
Shikoh Atif, for joining us, global financial expert and senior economist from Canada, for letting us know your views about the latest happening when it comes to US and Canada trade war. And now we go over to Barrister Fatma Shaheen. Barrister Fatma Shaheen, how do you look at it from an international law perspective? How do you look at it from a legal perspective? Kindly help us understand.
For me, very comprehensively explained everything. And when we do talk about this, very frankly speaking, there are not many questions of international law coming in play here, because two parties, they are free to talk about issues, they are free to talk about trade the way they would want to. I think what would be more important to see is the way, and I think that is something that you pinpointed during your own conversation as well, the way this ad was actually construed. At least if I was to look at it, I would see it as something which then blurs the line between trade policy and judicial independence. And I think in the larger picture, this is an issue that we do need to see with regards to Trump's narrative of promoting American sovereignty, of American independence. And then of course it is something that would appeal to the American domestic base to start out with. And then again, we just shouldn't, I would at least just not see it in terms of how it would impact Canada, which I feel the speaker before me, since he was an expert on this area, explained it very well, that of course it would have a very lasting and adverse impact on Canada's economy. I think the bigger question that we do need to ask in this regard is that how will all these tariffs generally impact the world at large? How would it actually change, the geopolitical, the geoeconomic
Right.
narrative in
Barrister
this regard?
Fatma, also, this is a big decision, entirely halting the trade talks, absolutely terminating them. Now, how is it intervening, or, it's kind of disrupting the Supreme Court decision which was been set by Donald Trump?
It would be that by that virtue, then of course, indirect contravention to that. In addition to that, I think what is again very important to talk about is that how it would also, of course, give Canada that ideal opportunity to look for export diversification, that to in other areas, be it Asia, be it Africa, be it even for that matter Latin America. So of course, whereas of course there's no denying to the fact that there might be a contravention, I do feel that here particularly there are greater questions of economics, of the economy at large, as opposed to there being legal questions to be answered. Because at the end of the day, regardless of whether you're contravening a judicial precedent, regardless of whether you're contravening an agreement you had with a particular party, with a particular country, at the end you have to see the economic repercussions flowing there onward. So I think the
Absolutely.
speaker before me
Thank you
explained
so
this
much,
very.
Barrister Fatma Shaheen, for your valuable insights and for joining us in our program. Mahnoor, it's all about economy, it's all about tariffs, it's a trade war between, US and Canada.
Yeah.
How would you comment on the entire situation, looking at the discussion that we just had?
So basically, I want to comment on what Barrister Fatma has said. There is a legal aspect of it. As we all know, the makers of this video, the Premier of Ontario, they used the voiceover of Ronald Reagan, who was then President of US. And then the Ronald Reagan organization, the Ronald Reagan Foundation, has claimed that they are looking for the legality of it because they didn't ask for their permission before using the voiceover. So that's the one legal aspect of it. But I think we and the world and even the citizens of US need to decode Trumpism, because it's something very different. Trump happens to be a very different president as compared to the presidents of US in the past, and we have seen that the repercussions of such kind of tariffs, it was 25% initially, then it was raised to 35% in August. So I believe that the accept was of Donald Reagan speech that mentioned that it would hurt every American.
Absolutely.
Eventually we need
absolutely, Mahnoor.
yeah.
But what about the timings? If you see, because we were talking about the blurring the lines in public communication, the timings are really odd because here you're actually having very serious kind of trade discussions with the world most powerful leader, and you're negotiating on your economy. How can you do that when it comes to communication and kind of indirect campaigning from the Canadian side?
I believe we have seen the nationalistic policies of Trump, but now Trump really wants to glorify it, and it wants to show that America doesn't need anyone, and America is independent in all terms, whether it is energy, whether it is trade, whether it is weapon industry. We don't need anyone, but that's not actually the case. It's always in a two-way, and we already knew that before that US and Canada was having free trade agreement, then they included Mexico, and then there were trade tariffs up to 25%, then that increased to 35%. That shows that how much Trump is like trying to explore and experiment.
Mahnoor, another very important question. You were saying that Trump is trying to save the industries and at-home jobs, and at the same time saying that we don't need anyone. Do you think it's going to work in the long term? Because there's going to be a lot of trouble when it comes to workers, industries on both sides. There's going to be people who are going to be losing their jobs. It's going to be a troublesome economy, maybe on both sides. So how do you see that?
Practically, Mahin, it's still a transitional phase for US as well, for the people of US as well, and for the policies they are making for them. So it's still a transitional phase, but I believe considering the past experiences, the world and the demands and needs of contemporary world, it wouldn't work that way, as Trump has already mentioned that you cannot glorify, or we have seen that there is always multipolarity.
Absolutely.
Unipolarity does not hold the responsibility and does not work, and it is a very big responsibility. And we have seen in the past when there was unipolarity, how worlds suffer, how the unipolar states suffer. So it is not that way, and we have seen that if today Canada is suffering, they are doing that, and they are, using all kind of.
How do you see Canada's economy suffering? We just talked to our expert. He said that it's going to be devastating in coming months.
I believe it is just a pressure tactic by Trump. It wouldn't, move like he has mentioned that all kind of negotiations have been terminated. It wouldn't go that way. We all need each other, and when we are sharing a longest border, it is not possible to terminate all kind of negotiation when in the past you are having a lot of trade agreements with each other.
It's still a progressive process. We have to see whether they're suspended or they're terminated. For now, they seem like they're terminated, but let's see if it's suspended or not.
To be very honest, mine, it all depends on Trump's mood. One day he'll wake up and he'll say.
Thank you so much, Mahnoor Qureshi and Barrister Fatma Shaheen, for joining us. It was an important discussion about the US and Canada trade war, how it might be affecting people on both sides, whether it be it industries or the workers or the consumers or the businesses. It is going to be having a lot of impact. Canadian economy is going to be in trouble maybe in the coming months, but still it is a process. Still we are hoping for better things to come up, and still we can't say that has it completely halted or they are just suspended for the time being. Let's hope for the best. This is all for tonight's show. Mahnoor Jafar signing off. Stay tuned.